In today's brief video, I'm going to answer the age-old question that every weed smoker, myself included, has at one point or another asked themselves throughout their weed smoking career. And today's question is brought to us by a Mr. Santiago who posted this recently on one of my TikTok videos. Does weed make you dumber even if you're not high? So what Mr. Santiago is asking is, does consuming weed make you dumb? Or I suppose if you're already dumb, can it make you dumber? And that's the question that I'm going to answer in today's video with three major points that I want to make, because I actually think what weed does to a person, especially if we cross into weed addiction, is far worse than making a person dumb. Now, if you wind up enjoying the content in today's video, be sure to check out the video description or the pinned comment for a free 7-step guide on how to quit smoking weed today, to learn more about our one-on-one paid addiction mindset recovery coaching programs, or to join our Addiction Mindset mental health community for $4.95 a month. It's a great way to get support and help support the channel if you can't do the one-on-one or you don't want the free stuff. All right. I think weed and its side effects are actually far worse than making a person dumb. And this is all based on my personal experience of 7 to 9 years struggling with weed addiction. Problem number one, I think smoking weed has the ability to make you slower. And in today's hyper fast-paced world, it's really a bad thing to be moving slow. Whether it's in your career, whether it's in your job, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're trying to raise a family and give them the best life possible, the world moves at an extremely fast pace. And if you're not keeping up, you are going to get left behind. I promise you that. And unfortunately, lots of people are experiencing this now, currently in today's times, with the rates of inflation, with the job outlook, with all these various issues that we face as a society. And if you're not on your A game a majority of the time, I promise you someone else is, and they're after the exact same piece of cheese that you are. And if you're not thinking, if you're not moving, if you're not moving at a good clip, someone else is going to steal your piece of cheese. Okay? That's an old book, Who Stole My Cheese, but that's a great business book, by the way. But that's one thing. And I think that's bad because you can work through dumb. I'm not a particularly smart person. Yes, I got a doctorate in chiropractic. Yes, I've started businesses. Yeah, I'm an addiction recovery coach. But I'm not particularly smart, okay? But I can grind. I can hustle. I have work ethic. I have determination. I have drive. Many of the same characteristics that you have, because if you're watching this, there's a good chance you might be struggling with weed addiction. And in order to maintain an addiction, you need all of those personality traits. But you can use those traits to overcome dumb. You cannot, though, use those traits to overcome slow. And I found that weed was really slowing you down. And before I knew it, my life was passing me by. And here I was moving in slow motion. So that's problem one. Problem number two is that I think weed makes you numb. And this is an extremely bad thing because numb is a feeling in and of itself. Lots of people, myself included, would smoke weed and think, oh, this makes me numb. This is a nice escape. But numb is a feeling. You're aware that you feel numb. You're aware that you're not feeling anything. And I think this is the worst feeling of them all. Emotions are what make us human. And not being able to truly experience emotions, the highs and the lows, is an extremely dehumanizing experience. So it's one thing to be dumb, because when you're dumb, you can still experience emotions. You can experience the good times, you can experience the bad times, and that's what makes you human. But if you're constantly numb, that's not good. It's very dehumanizing. And a lot of people who struggle with addiction to cannabis have felt this. And if you're struggling with that, I'm sure you know exactly what it is I'm talking about. The one advantage to smoking weed, that numbing effect, might actually be more of a detriment than you think. And that has to do a lot with reframing how you view the plant, because now if you view being numb as a bad thing and a dehumanizing thing, well, now it's going to make quitting a little bit easier. Just a tip for you guys. The other major problem is I think that weed made me complacent. I've often said this before. Smoking weed doesn't cure the boredom. It simply makes you content with being bored. And I was very complacent in my life with being numb and moving at a very slow pace. And I'm going to tell you guys, I was actually ahead of a lot of people. Sometimes in my videos, I make it sound like I was in a bad spot, but I had started my own business. I was doing okay in many regards of my life, better than many of my peers. But I knew that I wasn't performing up to the potential that I could be performing at. And weed had made me complacent and content with the boredom, with the numbness, with the pace that I was moving at. It made me complacent with the procrastination. And I think this is an extremely bad thing because, again, you can be dumb, but you can still be frustrated with being complacent and moving slowly. And those emotions, the frustration and the anxiety and the stress of moving slow and being behind, are going to propel you to take the next steps to make a change, right? And you can be dumb and still feel all those emotions and still apply those emotions to escape a state of complacency. But if you're stuck, numb, slow, and complacent, and weed is playing a role in keeping you trapped in that loop, which I was stuck in that cycle, okay? So I promise you I'm not judging. That's a really, really bad thing. And one of the first steps to quitting is starting to see weed or starting to see cannabis for what it is and what it's doing to you. Because if you're sitting here watching this and saying, I could be doing better as an entrepreneur, I could be doing better as a father, as a mother, as a husband, as a wife, as a boyfriend, as a girlfriend, as a student, as an athlete, I am capable of achieving more. And I actually want to experience the good times again. I want to learn new coping skills so I can manage the bad times again. Because that's what a healthy human being ought to do, because that's what makes us human. I understand what it's like to be stuck, and I understand what it's like to want out of this cycle. And that starts with breaking down the various different types of ways that cannabis is negatively impacting you. Now, the last thing that I'll say that I think is also worse than being dumb, but kind of goes hand in hand, is cannabis trains us into the consumer mindset, right? So when I would smoke weed, I would just consume. I'd get really high and just mindlessly scroll social media content, which would then lead into adult media content. Then I would consume food, not like your traditional like stoner eating snack type thing, but I was over consuming food at points in my weed addiction, wasn't eating how I felt I should be, right? Mindless spending, decreased impulse control, impacted in a very negative way my centers in my brain that were responsible for delayed gratification. So all of these things train us into the consumer mindset. And I think that's a very dangerous thing in today's world. Not only do I think that can quickly drive you to be broke if you're constantly consuming, but I also think that can set you up for a state of real depression and anxiety and just a sense of overall, and I know this does not apply to everyone who's watching this video, so please don't let me project that onto you, but overall just kind of worthlessness, right? Because if we're constantly consuming and we're not producing and we're not making something that we are proud of, that we can feel worthwhile about, that's usually a bad thing. That usually results in that depression, that anxiety, that lack of motivation. And I think weed is one of those things that trains us into a consumer mindset. And I know this to be true. This is one of the reasons why, and I'm not against it, but why you're going to see mass legalization. It's to lure in the masses, to get more consumers, to drive more revenue, period. That's the bottom line. Someone selling a product, You are the consumer of that product, and they are taking money from you, and you are willingly giving it to them. Okay? That's what's happening in that transaction. You are being trained in just yet another way to be a consumer. And look, we all consume, right? I consume food, I consume water, I consume electricity, I consume data on my phone. I get it. We're all consumers to an extent. That's the way society is. But at least now, being away from cannabis, I'm very conscious of the things that I'm choosing to consume. And I think that makes me a very smart person. So I don't know that weed makes you dumber. I actually think being dumb isn't that big of a deal because you can work through dumb, and most people aren't dumb. Most people just don't apply themselves. I think, though, it can make you slower, it can make you numb, it can make you complacent, and it can train you into a consumer mindset. And that can have multiple negative impacts in many areas of a person's life. So if weed addiction, or this is something you're struggling with, why don't you check out the pinned comment and considering booking a one-on-one coaching call where we can talk more about this stuff and help you develop the mindset to make quitting easier, or join our mental health community, or just download that free 7-step guide, or follow me into the next video. It really doesn't matter. Just do something. Don't do nothing, okay? Don't be complacent. Don't be numb. Take action. All right, guys, until next time.